There is a lot of information about the new Hazard Communications Program that's changing the way organizations comply with the new rules. This program is an explanation of how to comply without changing your entire HazCom program. The Globally Harmonized System, or GHS, is an international approach to hazard communication, providing agreed criteria for classification of chemical hazards, and a standardized approach to label elements and safety data sheets. It is based on major existing systems around the world, including OSHA's Hazard Communication Standard and the chemical classification and labeling systems of other U.S. agencies. The result of this negotiation process is the United Nations document entitled Globally Harmonized System of Classification and Labeling of Chemicals, commonly referred to as the Purple Book. OSHA has modified the Hazard Communication Standard, or HCS, to adopt the GHS to improve safety and health of workers through more effective communications of chemical hazards. The GHS provides a standardized approach, including detailed criteria for determining what hazardous effects a chemical poses, as well as standardized label elements assigned by hazard class and category. This will enhance both employer and worker comprehension of the hazards, which will help to ensure appropriate handling and safe use of workplace chemicals. In addition, the safety data sheet requirements establish an order of information that is standardized. The harmonized format of the safety data sheets will enable employers, workers, health professionals, and emergency responders to access the information more efficiently and effectively, thus increasing their utility. Adoption of the GHS in the U.S. and around the world will also help to improve information received from other countries. Since the U.S. is both a major importer and exporter of chemicals, American workers often see labels and data sheets from other countries. The diverse and sometimes conflicting national and international requirements can create confusion among those who seek to use hazard information effectively. During the phase-in period, employers would be required to be in compliance with either the existing HCS or the revised HCS, or both. OSHA recognizes that hazard communication programs will go through a period of time where labels and SDSs under both standards will be present in the workplace. This will be considered acceptable, and employers are not required to maintain two sets of labels and SDSs for compliance purposes. OSHA is requiring that employees are trained on the new label elements, such as pictograms and signal words, in the new SDS format by December 2013. While many countries are in various stages of implementing the GHS, OSHA believes that it is possible that American workplaces may begin to receive labels and SDSs that are consistent with the GHS shortly after publication, thus making it important to ensure that when employees begin to see the new labels and SDSs in their workplaces, they will be familiar with them, understand how to use them, and access the information effectively. The three major areas of change are in hazard classifications, labels, and safety data sheets. Hazard classification. The definitions of hazard have been changed to provide specific criteria for classification of health and physical hazards, as well as classification of mixtures. These specific criteria will help to ensure that evaluations of hazardous effects are consistent across manufacturers, and that labels and safety data sheets are more accurate as a result. Labels. Chemical manufacturers and importers will be required to provide a label that includes a harmonized signal word, pictogram, and hazard statement for each hazard class and category. Precautionary statements must also be provided. Safety data sheets will now have a specified 16-section format. The revised Hazard Communication Standard is a modification to the existing standard. The parts of the standard that did not relate to the GHS remained largely unchanged. There have been some modifications to terminology in order to align the revised HCS with language used in the GHS. For example, the term hazard determination has been changed to hazard classification, and material safety data sheet was changed to safety data sheet. Under both the current Hazard Communication Standard and the revised HCS, an evaluation of chemical hazards must be performed considering the available scientific evidence concerning such hazards. The revised HCS has specific criteria for each health and physical hazard, along with detailed instructions for hazard evaluation and determinations as to whether mixtures or substances are covered. It also establishes both hazard classes and hazard categories. For most of the effects, the classes are divided into categories that reflect the relative severity of the effect. The current HCS does not include categories for most of the health hazards covered, so this new approach provides additional information that can be related to the appropriate response to address the hazard. Under the current Hazard Communication Standard, the label preparer must provide the identity of the chemical and the appropriate hazard warnings. This may be done in a variety of ways, and the method to convey the information is left to the preparer. Under the revised HCS, once the hazard classification is completed, the standard specifies what information is to be provided for each hazard class and category. Labels will require the following elements: pictogram, a symbol plus other graphic elements, such as a border, background pattern, or color that is intended to convey specific information about the hazards of a chemical. Each pictogram consists of a different symbol on a white background within a red square frame set on a point, i.e., a red diamond. There are 9 pictograms under the GHS. However, only 8 pictograms are required under the HCS. Signal words. A single word used to indicate the relative level of severity of hazard and alert the reader to a potential hazard on the label. The signal words used are danger and warning. Danger is used for the more severe hazards, while warning is used for less severe hazards. Hazard statement. A statement assigned to a hazard class and category that describes the nature of the hazards of a chemical, including, where appropriate, the degree of hazard. Precautionary statement. A phrase that describes recommended measures to be taken to minimize or prevent adverse effects resulting from exposure to a hazardous chemical or improper storage or handling of a hazardous chemical. There are 9 pictograms under the GHS to convey the health, physical, and environmental hazards. The final Hazard Communication Standard requires 8 of these pictograms, the exception being the environmental pictogram, as environmental hazards are not within OSHA's jurisdiction. A quick look at the hazard pictograms and their corresponding hazards. Health hazard. Carcinogen, mutagenicity, reproductive toxicity, respiratory sensitizer, target organ toxicity, aspiration toxicity, flame, flammables, pyrophorics, self-heating, emits flammable gas, self-reactives, organic peroxides, exclamation mark, irritant, skin and eye, skin sensitizer, acute toxicity, harmful, narcotic effects, respiratory tract irritant, hazardous to ozone layer, gas cylinder, gases under pressure, corrosion, skin corrosion, burns, eye damage, corrosive to metals, exploding bomb, explosives, self-reactives, organic peroxides, flame over circle, oxidizers, environment, non-mandatory, aquatic toxicity, skull and crossbones, acute toxicity, fatal or toxic. Under the revised Hazard Communication Standard, pictograms must have red borders. OSHA believes that the use of the red frame will increase recognition and comprehensibility. Therefore, the red frame is required regardless of whether the shipment is domestic or international. The revised Hazard Communication Standard requires that all red borders printed on the label have a symbol printed inside it. Employers may choose to label workplace containers either with the same label that would be on shipped containers for the chemical under the revised rule, or with label alternatives that meet the requirements for the standard. Alternative labeling systems, such as the National Fire Protection Association, or NFPA, 704 hazard rating, and the Hazardous Material Information System, or HMIS, are permitted for workplace containers. However, the information supplied on these labels must be consistent with the revised HCS, such as no conflicting hazard warnings or pictograms. The information required on the safety data sheet will remain essentially the same as that in the current standard. The current Hazardous Communications Standard indicates what information has to be included on an SDS, but does not specify a format for presentation or order of information. The revised HCS requires that the information on the SDS is printed using consistent headings in a specified sequence. The SDS format is the same as the ANSI standard format, which is widely used in the U.S. and is already familiar to many employees. The format of the 16-section SDS should include the following sections. Section 1, Identification. Section 2, Hazard Identification. Section 3, Composition Information on Ingredients. Section 4, First Aid Measures. 5. Firefighting Measures. Section 6, Accidental Release Measures. Section 7, Handling and Storage. Section 8, Exposure Controls, Personal Protection. Section 9, Physical and Chemical Properties. Section 10, Stability and Reactivity. Section 11, Toxicology Information. Section 12, Ecological Information. Section 13, Disposable Considerations. Section 14, Transport Information. Section 15, Regulatory Information. Section 16, Other Information, including date of preparation or last revision. Sections 12 through 15 may be included in the SDS, but are not required by OSHA. OSHA anticipates that in addition to safety and health benefits, the revised HCS will result in 4 types of productivity benefits. 1. For chemical manufacturers, because they will need to produce fewer SDSs in future years. 2. For employers, in providing training to new employees as required by the existing OSHA HCS through the improved consistency of the labels and SDSs. 3. For firms engaging in or considering engaging in international trade. Basically, if you have a current hazardous communication program, including a written program, inventory control and training, the major changes that will affect most companies will be the safety data sheet, labels, and pictograms. The changes from MSDS to SDS will make it much easier to standardize the safety data sheets, as the required information will be in the same place on each SDS. Label changes are easy to do, and almost every label vendor now has these new labels available. Pictograms will take just a while longer to learn and implement, but this will simplify the information for almost everyone using chemicals and hazardous materials. Training is always an important part of any new program. Organizations with a current HazCom program can make these adjustments quickly and include these new basics in training. Overall, GHS is nothing to fear. It's a simplified system, and in the long run, will result in greater efficiency, productivity, and of course, great safety and health for anyone working with chemicals and hazardous materials.